Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this webinar where we are going to talk about carbon markets and shipping decarbonization. My name is Sanjay Jain from EKI Energy Services Indore, India. I'll share the screen with you in order to start. I hope you can. I hope you can see my screen clearly, and I hope I'm clearly audible and visible. Well, so the topic today is the carbon markets and how carbon markets can be support shipping decarbonization. The topic of interest is mainly towards shipping. So we are going to discuss the carbon markets in relation to the shipping. So this is the agenda for today's talk. This has been designed to keep it simple so that even these people who do not belong to shipping industry, or for that matter carbon industry, they can still understand what we are talking about. So it starts with about the speaker, which is myself, a bit of introduction, and then the organization which I'm representing, then a bit about the carbon markets and carbon credits, and then we go into shipping side of it, what are the emissions, what are the problems, and what are the steps being taken with respect to shipping. And then we discuss about the interfaces, how the carbon markets can be helpful by registering some of the decarbonization projects and by generating some carbon credit revenue. We discussed a little bit more about how projects can be registered and how the credits can be issued and monetized in order to support such projects. And then the uses of funds, and then a couple of, the ifs and buts which do crop up sometimes in the ship owners or ship managers' mind about this process. And then the last is the summary and the Q&A, the questions and answers. The Q, you can put your questions as I go through the slides. You can put your questions in the chat box. And towards the end, we'll try to take up as many questions as possible. And then the questions which we cannot take up, and for people who have more to discuss with us, we'll provide you the contact details in the end. So that's the agenda for today. So I think we are good to go. So I'll go on to the first slide, the first part of the webinar. The bit about the speaker, which is myself. I'm a naval architect from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and a fellow of Royal Institution of Naval Architects, London, with over 25 years in maritime, offshore, oil and gas, energy, infrastructure industries. Have worked with several of these initiatives, many shipyards and shipbuilding, ship repair, which where such initiatives are taken, especially about these decarbonizations or GHG or any kind of retrofits. Currently working with EKI Energy Services as the Vice President Business Development and leading some new business segments such as maritime shipping, carbon capture, etc. About the company which I represent, EKI is been there since 2008, and they are the brand name Enking International. The company provides the carbon credit consultancy, and now actually providing the decarbonization partner as a decarbonization partner with several of the companies in several industry segments across several geographies, 3,000 plus clients, 300 plus people, 40 plus nations. We are working. The 90% market share for Indian market and about 30% market share in the international side. So, bit more about the company. So, it's not just the carbon credits. The company is now providing the end-to-end net zero services as a decarbonization partner for several industries, shipping being one of them. The carbon credit services, by the monetizing, by generating, supplying carbon credit, or by developing projects which generate carbon credit and then monetizing them. Climate change and sustainability has been a very hot topic of late, and we are doing quite a lot of work in that. Resource efficiency domains is something which is we're talking about, is relevant to but climate change and net zero mapping. So next part of our discussion is about the carbon market. So it's more about the introductory. For those who do not understand what carbon markets are, I'll talk a little bit about the carbon markets. This is a slide thanks to BCG, which shows voluntary carbon market and compliance market size. As on 2021, you could see that compliance markets is of the value $850 billion, and while voluntary carbon markets are $2 billion US, and it is projected to grow at a 5 times speed, five times by 2030. So easily growing to 10 to 40 billion US dollar in size, in value. So the carbon markets having a great potential for the simple reason that there is a big push for decarbonization in almost segment. Be it several industries, communities, the nations. Everybody is right now is the big agenda is to push for decarbonization, to reduce for GHG emissions. So what are the compliance markets and voluntary markets? So I will understand that in the next slides. So compliance carbon markets is where the governments are involved. To put it in discuss about simple words, is where the governments are regulating and where the governments are making policies, where the government or government's nodal agencies are running the market, or then that is where it becomes a compliance market. Examples are like EU ETS, for example, the European Union ETS, that's a compliance market. You have the Chinese emission trading scheme, you have the South Korean, the national emission trading schemes, they are all compliance markets. So there mostly how it operates is it operates on a cap and trade scheme, mostly, not all, where the governments will give you a limit, a cap for the emissions in particular industry segments or by company wise, and you can if you emit more than that cap or limit, then you have to pay the emission allowances. So allowances, the emission, that all the rates are fixed by them, and accordingly. So as it says, companies that emit more than the capped amount must purchase additional licenses or additional the allowances. Voluntary markets, on the other hand, is where the governments are not necessarily involved. I mean, governments are not involved. It's voluntary. It's on the voluntary. The project gets registered on the voluntary carbon registries such as Gold, Vera, or Global Carbon Council. The Gold standard is based out of Zurich in Switzerland, while you have Vera, which is based out of America. You have the Global Carbon Council, which is based out of Qatar. These are all the voluntary carbon registries which register the voluntary projects. The projects from voluntary companies who are doing voluntary steps to reduce their GHG emissions. So it goes through, there are 3-4 stakeholders. The registry, of course, is involved because they register the projects. And then there are companies like us who will develop the project, who will register it, and who will do the trading of carbon credits, generation and trading of carbon credits. And there is a third party which is in the process, which will verify all the claims, for what emissions are being claimed or monetized. And the actual project owner itself, the project belongs to a client. It could be shipping client where this the project for reduction is taking place. It could be a cement or depending on the client. So these are the main stakeholders who are involved in the voluntary market. And as the name suggests, voluntary. It's basically the steps being taken on a voluntary basis, and on voluntary basis the registration is taking place, and the credits are being generated, and the credits are being monetized, mainly to support to fund the GHG initiative as an incentive to support those emission reduction initiatives. Carbon credits, in a simple words, for those who are not yet familiar with what a carbon credit, one carbon credit is. So one carbon credit is 1 ton of CO2 reduced from the atmosphere. Now it could, in fact, there are equivalents. The greenhouse gases, in fact, you could, there are there is also, other than CO2, there is a methane, which is a greenhouse gas. There is N2O. So one carbon credit, when you say, is 1 ton of CO2. So if it is 1 ton of methane, then there is an equivalence, warming equivalence, which is considered. So if 1 ton of methane is reduced, it is equivalent to about 25 ton of CO2 reduced. So, but let's not get too much confused about it. If you remember that, okay, one carbon credit is 1 ton of CO2 reduced, that's good enough to understand the process to start with. The projects, as I spoke about, where the registrations take place in the voluntary carbon markets, it's the gold standard, it's the VERA, verified carbon standard under VERA. Then you also have CDM, but the CDM under UNFCCC, but that is currently under transition. There is a new mechanism is going to come soon. GCC I spoke about. These are the standards, the global registries where the projects can be registered for carbon credit benefits. To give you an idea from which type of areas or which type of projects the carbon credits can come. Renewable energy, of course, is the number one. And that's where actually the entire carbon market started. When the renewable, the focus started on, from the fossil fuel or fossil energy to renewable. So renewable like wind, solar, when the credits they were being generated and being monetized from renewable energy. Energy efficiency is like saving of energy, or making the energy efficient. The process, having a process or having an equipment which consumes less energy. So that energy saved is indirectly the emission saved. Fuel switching, so these that's another area where you can generate the carbon credits from. Household and community based, that's another big area. In fact, we are quite active, the company, where the clean cooking stoves or clean water filters and the LED lighting and biogas, etc. These are all the activities which generate carbon credit directly or indirectly. Waste disposal, that's another big area. A lot of waste. In fact, you might have heard about several examples where, in fact, the place where I'm sitting is having a big activity in that segment. The municipal waste is being converted into biogas and energy, waste to energy, and thereby generating credits, as well as giving a lot of the GHG emission reductions are being achieved. So and the number of type of waste is not just these municipal waste. In fact, there are several other wastes which are now being converted to energy. Transport is what we were talking. I mean, in shipping is also a type of transport. So, road, rail. So there we can generate carbon credits by taking steps for GHG reduction. Agriculture is another big area where, by taking sustainable practices, we can reduce GHG, greenhouse gases, especially methane is very relevant there to reduce. Forestry, you would know. I mean, many know that as a thumb rule, they all said, plant a tree and you reduce the CO2, because the trees absorb the CO2, they remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So forestry, but here we're talking about the bigger projects, forestry projects. So they definitely have always been a traditional way of removing CO2 or cleaning up the atmosphere. Carbon is about mangrove plantation. Chemical, then there are these new technologies like carbon capture storage and N2O, etc., are also coming up. There are a number of new technologies are coming up, which are actually contributing to GHG emission reduction, and thereby are eligible for carbon credit. So this was a snapshot for how carbon credits from which areas the carbon credits can come from. And these are the activities we can do in several of the industry segments. What about carbon neutral and net zero? That's important for any industry. So here, even for shipping industry, I would want to discuss a bit about carbon neutral and net zero, as these two words are many times confused by the stakeholders. Now, carbon neutral is a short-term goal where you have some existing emissions which you can offset by buying the equivalent carbon credits. So that's thereby becoming carbon neutral. So that's a short-term thing which you can buy carbon credits and become carbon neutral. But that actually is not reducing your emissions from operations, your scope 1 or scope 2. So the thrust in the long term is for reducing the emissions. So that is what the second column talks about, the net zero. Net zero. So you have to have the steps and measures which will actually reduce your emissions, and then it's possible that you may not get your emissions right down to zero. It may not be practically possible. Then the remaining emissions you can offset it by credits which are generated from carbon removal projects, not the other type of project, carbon removal projects like forestation, which removes the project, or carbon capture, removes the carbon. So the short-term goals and long-term goal. So companies, states, nations, they're all having the short-term, the carbon neutrality goals, and then they are having the net zero goals in the long term. Now we dive a bit into the shipping side, transport side. So this slide shows the emissions from various modes of transport until 2021. The road, rail, shipping, aviation. So you can see most of the emissions is from the road transport. The shipping and the aviation more or less similar, but as a standalone they are significant. So as you can see, by 2021 it's about 0.84 gigaton of CO2 was emitted by shipping alone. So that's as a standalone, and this is going to go up if it continues like this. By substantial levels it will go up. So each of the sector will have to do its bit to reduce emission. The road, you're already seeing on the roadside, there are several measures already taking place. You have the electric vehicles, you have several of others type of vessels, the road transports, and on the rail also for that matter. The action is already happening. So shipping and aviation is something which is now need to pick up in a big way in order to be a real have the tangible effect for reduction. Just a bit more about the shipping has been a mainstay for the goods transportation of goods, especially in the international area. You have seen that even during the Corona times, shipping doesn't stop. And shipping is so important, crucial for the transportation of goods. It has to go on, come what may. 80% of the international trade is by sea, as many of us are already aware. The total 23% of GHG emission from the transports, from logistics, which we said about 3%, that 0.8 something by 2021. That works out about 2.53% of the overall emissions. If uncapped, if we don't stop these emissions from shipping, they're going to keep increasing to 2.1 gigaton by 2050, or maybe even more. So the idea is to limit these emissions from all sectors. Because shipping being such a huge sector with several stakeholders, it is going to take a lot of effort. It is going to take a lot of people to come together to achieve it properly. So it has started, and it's high time that all stakeholders come together to realize it. So by IMO, I'll discuss about what targets have been. By 2050, IMO says the 50% reduction is to be done in the annual GHG emission from shipping, as compared to 2008 baseline. This is going to require trillions of dollars of investment in the shipping alone, because shipping is a capital intensive industry. They going for new ships on new fuels, or even going for retrofits of significant nature require a lot of money. So it needs to be properly planned and done, and then it needs to be done in a timely manner, so that we don't miss the bus. You have seen the recent IPCC report, where we are already too late with respect to our steps. So there is no time to lose. So shipping is no exception from that. This is a slide again. I'm talking a bit more from the IMO side. IMO has been taking steps. So IMO is, for those who are not from shipping industries, the International Maritime Organization, based in London. They are the regulatory body which regulates the shipping all over the world. So their committee, they have a committee called MEPC, Marine Environment Protection Committee. That committee is represented by ship owners, ship managers, charterers, shipyards, designers, and some of the other stakeholders. And they keep making these regulations every year. They make regulations with respect to the environment protection. In the last, I remember 2020, they had put out the regulation with respect to NOx and SOx in order to reduce the NOx and SOx level emissions. So as you can see in this chart, if maybe my apologies if probably, but I'll just explain you. As early as 1997, the IMO had been talking about the CO2 emissions from ships. And then starting 2003, there were more action. In fact, the 2013, if you see, there's some more concrete action started coming in, whereby mandatory, when the ships are designed for the new builds, the requirement of EEDI, Energy Efficiency Design Index, was introduced. So all new ships were required to calculate their Energy Efficiency Design Index, for the new builds, and they were also required to have a ship energy efficiency management plan, SEEMP. So since 2013, this has been going on. The steps were taken, and many of the ship owners, in fact, were prompted by these steps, and they've been taking voluntary steps already. Ship owners, ship managers, about saving fuel, saving energy, having these EEDI implemented properly, or having the SEAMP put on board and using it properly. So in 2016, then this MEPC gave a regulation which required all ship owners to submit the data, their fuel consumption data, what they called as the IMO data collection system. That was put out, and it was enforceable from 1st January 2019. I mean, it was proposed in 2016 and to be enforced from January 2019. So as per that, in fact, all the ship owners are required to submit their fuel consumption data through a recognized organization or a approved verifier to the, it goes to IMO, or in between also talking about, there was in 2018, the European Union came up with their requirement of MRV, which is monitoring, reporting, and verification. That was something similar. Basically, they also required to have these data of fuel consumption Now, these requirements actually, though, when they are trying to receive the fuel consumption data from various ship owners across the world, in order to see the trends, how the consumptions are taking place and what regulations should be effectively brought, which can have the tangible effects with respect to, the GHG reduction without actually compromising the core of the operations. As I said in the beginning, shipping is such a crucial operation. You have to have the regulations, which is, you have to have the operations also, and you have to have the GHG reduction also. You can't be just one way that in order to enforce the regulations which compromises the operations itself. That so it needs to be balanced, done in a balanced way. So 2020, I spoke about, they had come up with this NOx and SOx, which is about more the particulate matter and more about the normal pollutions. That didn't have any relation to the GHG. Now in the 2021, they recently this carbon intensity indicator requirement was proposed, and from 2023 it is already applicable that ships will be required to will be rated. I mean, they're required to calculate their carbon intensity. The carbon intensity is, one is we talk about the GHG, CO2. The carbon intensity is the CO2 per deadweight per nautical mile. So per deadweight of the ship, the weight it carries, and the nautical mile, the distance it travels. So that's the intensity, the CO2 emitted per deadweight carried and per nautical mile it traveled. So that is what the carbon intensity is, CII, what is the carbon intensity indicator. So that is to be properly calculated, and then based on that CII, the rating will be given to the ships. A, B, C, D, E. A being the best means the A is the ship which is most fuel efficient or energy efficient, with E being the worst. So D and E, if the ships are rated as D and E, they will have a trouble in operating. They will require to submit the corrective actions, and they will be under the watch. So they currently the ship owners are submitting their fuel consumption data for 2023, and by 2024 April, they will be then assigned the rating by their flag state, or the bodies now authorized by their flag state after their necessary verifications. So a lot of activity already happening in terms of this. And then going forward, they have these by 2015, we have to have 50% overall reduction on the GHG, and in the carbon intensity also they have the target to reduce the carbon intensity by 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050. So these are two different targets. One is they have for the overall emissions, which is to reduce 50% by 2050. And they also have a target to reduce the carbon intensity by 40% by 2030 and 70% by 50. So work is going on. Now, so 2050, they say only 50% will reduce, and then the next target, when it will become net zero, that's yet to be said, because the clarity, they really don't know how long it's going to take. So they've said as soon as possible. As soon as possible after that to get to net zero. How to, some of this is showing a ship about from what all we can do in a ship to reduce the emission, or to reduce the fuel consumption or energy. So you can, what you see here is a ship, and it is showing you what percentage by what steps it can achieve the energy saving or the fuel saving. On the aft side, as you can see, there is a propeller and there is a rudder, and then there is a funnel accommodation, and on top of it is a funnel where all the emissions take place. And the ship body in between, and then the forward side, is the bulbous bow, the bulbous type of structure. That's the bulbous bow. And then the forecastle deck is there, and the cargo, as you can see. So just giving you a little bit idea about this, from the propulsion systems. If you modify your propeller, there are several types of modification nowadays possible. It can increase the efficiency of propulsion. For the same fuel, it will go more. It will travel more distance if you have a properly installed or properly designed propeller. So there are nowadays, the design modifications are being done. The propellers are being used, ducted with ducts. Ducted propeller are being used. Eduport propulsions are being used. You have the propeller polishing and servicing is another area which can help, in the saving fuel, and and then the alignment between the rudder and the propulsion. Rudder is for changing the direction. It's like the steering for the ship. So if you have a proper integration between rudder and propeller, that helps as well. So the number of things I'll show you in the next slide. What exactly those steps which can save your fuel, save your energy, and thereby are eligible for carbon credits. So the 50 to 90%, if the vessel goes fully electric, which for a big ship is quite challenging, and it's yet a very, very very difficult. Though small vessels are, we have seen the ferries, etc. They are already operating on a fully electric basis. Solar electric ferries are there right here in India, many other places abroad in many parts of the world. You have solar electric or fully electric vessels, river going vessels. So that's quite possible, and that's a big step actually. If you can do that, then that reduces the emissions by 50 to 90%. The more achievable fuel in the short term is the biofuel for ships. So biofuel is being tried. In fact, for the small vessels, is already being tried. For some of the big vessels, under trial. The methanol is also being tried. So those also can help in some significant reduction. Biofuel third generation, as you can see, can reduce by 90%. You have the other type of fuels like hydrogen, ammonia, but they are all currently under the design approval stage. Some designs have been approved in principle, but they're yet to be demonstrated fully. So it's still a long way actually before the ships can start operating on hydrogen or ammonia. But then saving is for the GHG emission is really good there, 80 to 100%. You can see 1 to 10% energy management. That's the normal stuff. Wherever you go, if you manage the energy properly, whether it is a residential building or it's an airport or seaport or a ship for that matter, you can save 1 to 10% by proper management of energy. 2 to 20% by hull and superstructure. But bulbous bow is actually facing this as the ship travels forward, it is taking the resistance of water. So a bow needs to be designed efficiently in order to reduce that resistance from water. The lesser the resistance, the higher the speed of the ship, and the lesser will be the consumption of fuel. So energy and fuel will be saved. So bulbous bow design and superstructure design play an important role there for saving of fuel and energy. Speed optimization up to 75 speed. Okay, they say if you drive at an optimal speed or low speed, it consumes less fuel. That applies to all your vehicles, even road or rail. So there's something similar over there. Some optimal speed will have less consumption. That's about the speed optimization and capabilities. Voyage optimization about choose a voyage which has got less distance. For going from point A to point B, you could have a route 1 on route 2, which are actually equally good, but route 1 is less traveled, will consume less fuel. So why not go then choose the route 1? So those kind of optimization. The fleet management, logistics, that's about what vessel is best for a particular type of cargo. If you're trying to send a cargo, kind of overloading the cargo, sometimes or you're trying to send a wrong cargo on a ship, which you possibly will consume more fuel, then why not send it on a ship which will consume less fuel? If the same cargo came, we should send on that. So logistics matters. So these are the overall some basic steps where you can on a ship, which will help reduce the fuel, or which will help reduce in the energy consumption. We spoke about the data collection, the GHG and ESG reporting needs to be improved, and that applies to shipping as well. In fact, it applies to other industries just as it applies to other industries. The reporting needs to of the emission data, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. For those who are not aware, scope 1 is from your direct operations, scope 2 is from your electricity usages, scope 3 is from your supply chain. So all these emissions need to be calculated in a proper standard way, in a standard framework, and needs to be validated. And then only you'll have the correct idea of where what the corrective steps are required, and what we can do to reduce. So it's important to have the correct reporting and the correct data collection. Reduce emissions, we spoke about it. They use the energy efficient engines, switch to low carbon fuels, etc. Increase efficiency, that also we spoke about just in the last slide. Invest in clean technology, the electric propulsions, hybrid propulsions, the invest in renewable energy. In fact, there are also these, some in the next slides I'll show you, the wind operated, the sail is there on the ships, which are actually now, some of the ships we already seen that they have the wind operated sails. So and the solar operated, I just now spoke about the solar operated ferry, the solar electric ferry. So these are the steps as much as possible should be encouraged. Carbon offsetting, we just now discussed earlier about. Compliance and regulations, the 50% reduction, we did speak about it. Education and awareness is important again, about all the stakeholders who do not know. In fact, this entire objective of this webinar is to educate and make the stakeholders aware that what all steps can be taken, and how carbon markets, and how means you can generate carbon credits, and how you can generate that additional finance from carbon credits. Collaborate with stakeholders. The shipping being a huge industry, there are several stakeholders, so they all need to come together in order to have achieve the objectives which we set for ourselves for net zero. Capacity building, that's a requirement at all. If in the for a journey of net zero, capacity building is a very important exercise at all levels. So we now time, of course, is we all know that it's a high time. In fact, it's late. So if those who have not started, they better start immediately on these GHG, their net zero journey or carbon neutral journey. So monitoring, as I spoke earlier, monitoring those GHG emissions against standard practices or in a particular framework, like in this case, the global logistics emission, that framework would be suitable. The governance, the commitment, governance management framework, then develop the targets. And the targets, when you make as a company level, of course, the targets you would want to be aligned with your regulatory body like IMO. Or for IMO is the international regulatory body. Apart from that, you have the European Union, that's the regional regulatory body. Then you have at the national level regulatory bodies. So the all targets, for sure, who don't want to align with their targets, they yet to come up with a clear regulatory policies with respect to shipping. But so better to start early on voluntary basis. That's the whole idea of this talk. So start taking the steps on voluntary basis and start benefiting from voluntary credits. Reporting, you can have the reporting disclosures on carbon disclosure project like CDP. These platforms are there where the companies are showcasing their ESG disclosures or carbon disclosures. The SBTI is another one, the science-based target platform, where the companies are setting up their net zero based on their science, on certain calculations. So we are actually, as a company, helping the various organizations do that. The carbon credit opportunity. Now, before actually I go into a bit more about how the carbon credits are generated and monetized, I'll want to show you this slide from the gold standard. In fact, the gold standard I explained to you earlier about it. It's a registry where the ships, the projects, GHG projects are registered. So it is showing what are the steps are eligible, what kind of steps you take on the ships which will be eligible for carbon credit. In the A, it says design related measures. So design related engine re-rating, there's a engine re-rating means like your operating engine on a, but by the injection pump setting, you're by getting the same power by some adjustments. Reconfiguration of bulbous bore, we spoke about it. If you change the design of bulbous bore, change the bulbous bore design, it will help you save the fuel, and that resistance or the drag from the water will be reduced. Interceptor trim plates, some trim plates on the aft side are fitted so that it changes the trim of the vessel, and there is less consumption of fuel. Optimization of hull opening. Those who are from shipping industries would understand these terms easily, because those possibly not, then they might find it a bit difficult. But hull openings is there on the like on the front side you have the bore thruster opening, and on the aft side you have the sea chest. So all these, have the optimization of those hull openings will also actually help in reducing the fuel consumption. Waterline extension, air lubrication is something which we are hearing quite often nowadays, that fit a lubrication, air lubrication technology at the bottom of the ship, where a layer of air is created between the water and the ship bottom, thereby reducing the drag, water drag. So it will then save the fuel as well. So these are all kind of some new technologies coming up, and some of them have been there for traditionally been there. Now boss cap fins is there. You have the Mavis duct. We talked about the propeller rudder integration, and the propeller nozzles is there. You have the advanced blade sections, the propeller section optimization, propeller modifications. There are various types of modifications which can be done to the propeller so that your fuel consumption is less, energy consumption is less. Usage of wind power with sails. This has been already started on many of the ships now. You've seen this wind powered some of, but that is, of course, it is on some medium sized or small vessels only as of now, as there are challenges for big ships. Then you have machinery measures, the engine tuning. Engine can be tuned so that the fuel consumption is less. The operating measures are like controllable pitch propeller surface finish polishing. And then the painting of hull. If you put in the advanced some painting, some efficient painting on the hull. Hull is basically the body of the ship. So that is where if you put some efficient paint, it will reduce the drag with the water. Thereby, the consumption of fuel will also reduce. The fuel additives can be used. That can also help save the fuel. So these are some of the, broadly speaking, some of the steps which is saving fuel and saving energy. Thereby, they are eligible for carbon credits. The other measures like fuel switch. Now, if the vessels are going to a complete new fuel or in a hybrid way, like fossil come electric, or they are switching over to a fuel like hydrogen, ammonia, or for that matter, ethanol, methanol, some clean fuel, then those measures, of course, would be eligible for these benefits, and we can look at them on case-to-case basis. Carbon capture is another new technology which is coming up, and it is, in fact, coming in several industry segments. It is also coming here, so in the shipping. So the project side, I'll just speak about this project, how the project will be registered, like the project developers and consultant like us, how do we register these projects? So see, energy efficiency, fuel switch projects, or carbon credit projects, etc., which are eligible for carbon credit benefits and which are significantly reduced GHG, reducing the greenhouse gases, would be evaluated on a case-to-case basis. What we do is we do a feasibility study where we see the scale of reduction in GHG per annum, like 20,000-30,000 So normally a good scale is 20 to 30,000 carbon credit or tons of CO2 reduced per annum would be a good scale to go for a registration. The lesser scale we can see on a case-to-case basis, but a good scale is something like 20 to 30,000 at least of CO2 reduced per annum. So that thereby generating 20 to 30,000 carbon credit per annum. The projects are registered. So we as a project, we prepare the project design document, and based on the data which we receive from ship managers or ship owners, uh, and and it is put forward to the registry, and there is a third party like DNV, Bureau Veritas, and Apples, and the third party audit is done in order to give credibility to the entire process. And then based on the positive report from a third party, the project which we submit to the registry gets registered. Once the project, so the process takes about 6 to 8 months, and there are some fees for a typical project, which I'm saying about 20,000 credit per annum. Like the transaction cost is of the order of 15 to 20,000, but these would vary, depending on the scale of the project. But just a typical idea, these one-time costs actually we for the registration, we are paying it upfront, but then from the client's revenue, once the carbon credits are registered and revenue are flowing, we adjust it. This is how a bit about the carbon credits. Once the project gets registered, and then once the registration is completed, it will show on their website, the registry website, that so and so project is registered. And then the issuance, for the issuance of carbon credit, there is a verification which is again done by the same third party. They verify the claims and then issue the carbon credits. The carbon credits, I mean, they make a report, of suggestion or positive report. They going to the registry and then requesting them to issue that many credits. So the credits are accordingly issued. So credits are issued. The credits are a tradable commodity in the international market. That's a voluntary market we are talking. And then they trade anything between $1 to $10. Again, these are the price range which we can give you. There is nothing fixed. The prices can be different on a different day. So the process what we do is like for ship owners or ship managers, it's what they have to do is they have to provide us at a credible data of their GHG reduction steps, and then we put them, analyze them, and then we tell them that okay, this is a project good to go, and if the project is good to go, then we will take it forward for registration. And so then our revenue actually comes from a revenue sharing model, where the 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, depending on the amount of work for us. So this sharing model is for the carbon credit sharing. That's so 70-30, for example, the 70% of the credits would belong to the asset owner, which is ship owner, 30% to us for all the man hours we spend for 6-8 hours or 6-8 months or so. And the monetization of credits we do as we have the expertise in getting the best buy for the credits. So we monetize them, and then we pass on the agreed share to the buyers, to the ship owners, once the process gets completed. So this is the just a gist of the summary of how the projects are registered and how the benefits can be derived. The funds, there are some questions which come sometimes. A lot of ship owners have these apprehensions that okay, EU ETS is going to include shipping starting next year. Then you have the IMO sitting this summer in July. They have a committee meeting of MEPC. They might come up with something. They will come up. Regulatory markets sooner or later will come up with some regulations. But as of now, there are no guidelines which, and there even in future for that matter, there are no guidelines which stops you from going to voluntary market and generate some funds. For all the voluntary credits, voluntary steps you may be taking for last possibly for a few years now, maybe 5 years or 10 years. Some ship owners are already taking steps to save their fuel or save energy. So why not, some of these steps actually can generate money for you in the voluntary market. So there are no regulations even in the regulatory there are no guidelines which stops the ship owners from going into these voluntary markets and generating some additional support for funds. So summary is, the buzz of the word is, so for all industry, in fact, the decarbonization is the buzzword. For shipping is not excluded. The shipping, in fact, is there are a lot of activities taking place. So the whole idea where the money is going to come for, there's a big activity, trillions of dollars are going to be required. So they will be from internal sources and maybe some funds from the government, or maybe some loans, and so the funds may still fall short. The short may not be enough. So this is an area where you may generate some additional revenue to support the activities, to support the, and you may now for a project of scale, let's say if you have a project which is generating 40,000 credit per annum, and the credits can be claimed for something like 10 years. So 400,000 carbon credits can generate a significant revenue, significant support for which you can use to support your ongoing decarbonization activities, which you can also support to buy emission allowances in the regulatory bodies, and going forward actually. So it's a little time and upfront money. In fact, also we are not taking it. The transaction, the cost, whatever is there, will be adjusted in the revenue from the owner's revenue once it is assured. So there are no risk, in fact, for owners to come forward and use these opportunities in the voluntary carbon market and generate some funds. I'll take some questions in the last part of the question answer. Before I close the slides, and I'll just show you the contact details. I may not be able to take all the questions, but open to you can be in touch with me on these contact details which are given on the slide. We can have the discussions, not only about technical discussions. If there are some business related discussions which anybody wants to do, please feel free on this contact details. I'll just try to now take a few seconds break and see what questions we can take up and answer. So questions, the questions. No, I have to stop sharing. So where is the questions? How do I see? Where do I go? Yeah, 1 second. Mute. Mute. Okay. I have some of the questions. I'll try to see. There is one question. X company produces green fuel for white shipping industry. Who will benefit? Do we have procedure standards in place that gives clarity? So, okay, about there are these conflicts with respect to the ownership of carbon credit. So, if there is a fuel supplier, green fuel supplier, and then there is the ship being the asset ownership owner is using the fuel, they have to have an agreement between them. That not everybody can claim all the carbon credit. The carbon credit sharing mechanism which could be discussed between them, and they could arrive at an agreement, or maybe the fuel supplier may let go the credits in favor of the ship owner. So, but there needs to be an agreement with respect to that in writing. So, and that in fact those agreements we take it in upfront before going ahead and registering projects in order to avoid disputes later on. How much is the cap? Well, that is I do not quite understand that cap. Cap, well, this cap is the EU ETS. If you go to the EU ETS, if you're talking about how much is the cap, etc., you can refer to the EU ETS website. They will show you the cap company-wise, industry-wise, easily there. From IMO, there are no still only the regulations drafts are right now the discussions are taking place. They have this committee MEPC 80 meeting which will take place in July. There they're going to have discussions on the proposals, and then once the discussions take place, they will have some kind of regulatory guidelines coming up possibly in the next year. So it will take time. Nothing is going to. They're hoping for, of course, everybody is trying to push it, but it will take its own time because it has to go through several protocols. So it can't just go out by one discussion or two discussion. For the rating of next question, for the rating based on CII, it seems to me there will be an audit from a regulatory body. Are there standards like ISO for such kind of? For ISO standard for CII, no. Well, I'm not aware of any standard of ISO for CII. The ratings, the guidelines are there from the IMO. As of now, and based on those guidelines, in fact, the CII calculations are being done, and the rating will be assigned by the flag state or their recognized organization. The next question is, we manufacture solar and electric boat vessels. Can we register and claim the carbon credits? Yes, you can. Solar and electric boats, they definitely are helping in the overall GHG reduction and would be eligible. So we can definitely look at that. Which is the registration body that you register as voluntary carbon credit? Now, registration body, I explained to you, that's the gold standard. That's the Swiss-based registry. Then you have the Vera, which is American-based. Then you have Qatar-based GCC. So these are the most common bodies where the projects are registered for voluntary markets. In your slides, you said carbon credits have, next question, there's a value in range of USD to $10, but the carbon tax is around 50 euro per ton. This is huge gap. Well, the price which I showed you, the $1 to $10, this is just a price range. As of, in fact, the shipping, it's still new market for us, and there's not much trading of carbon credits done in the shipping segment. It might be even higher. So, but we had to tell you some range or some kind of idea that it fetches, it might fetch a higher price, but then you cannot compare it with the carbon tax or the from the EU, because the regulatory markets are different and voluntary markets are different. What the point which we are trying to drive here is, there is some support which you can generate from voluntary. It may not be enough to meet your regulatory requirements, but it's always something is better than nothing, and that something is also will be significant. It is not like peanuts kind of, if you, as I told you, the 400,000 credits if you are generating for 10 years or more, and then if your one credit trades for $2 or $5, it will be some good money to support your activities. Yeah, the next question, is there a typical time period for which the emissions are to be reported, like quarterly, monthly, or yearly? Is it same for all flag states? So emissions normally have to be compared, reported for, we try to take maximum time period. So quarterly would be fine, but yearly is still better, in order to compare the baseline and after your activity, what are the emissions. Normally, a yearly comparison is always better as compared to the lesser comparisons like 6 months or 8 months. So the higher the period, the better it is. But then we also have to see, what the project timelines, etc., while doing that. The next one is the value of credits standardized throughout the world? Is it different in different markets? Well, voluntary markets is the one market. Means voluntary, as you said, carbon. So there's a global market we are talking. The value of credit is the over-the-counter, price, as we said, it's not a fixed price. It depends on which day and the buyer, etc. And that's the trading team. And so there's actually cannot commit about the price or the value in voluntary. You have the price quite widely open seen for a regulatory market, but in the voluntary, it's not possible. Okay, I think these are some of the main questions which I could answer. And so, just want to summarize that the ship owners, they shouldn't have apprehensions about, these regulatory markets are going to come up and they will stop me from going to voluntary market. There are no guidelines as of now like this. So, and then the regulatory frameworks is still some time away. What is happen, I can here give you an example quickly about so both regulatory markets and voluntary markets have to operate in full potential. In order to get to that, in order to realize these objectives of 1.5 degrees centigrade, what they call is a public-private partnership. So only government alone cannot do it. So voluntary public partnership or public participation is very crucial here. And this transfer mechanism, as I said, you can generate money in voluntary and use it to use that money to buy. There's no labeling on money. You can buy that money for buying emission allowance in your regulatory markets also. And going forward, in fact, there is a transfer mechanism will also evolve. There's quickly one example I want to give you here is like IMO, you have the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. They had come up with this market-based mechanism called CORSIA, Carbon Offset and Reduction for aviation. So initially, so that was a regulatory market-based mechanism for aviation airlines, and it came some years before. Now they are actually, the CORSIA is accepting the credits directly generated from the voluntary markets like the gold standard or the Vera or the GCC. Those credits, if you have some, those credits generated in the voluntary markets are being directly accounted for into the CORSIA. So similar market-based transfer mechanism will evolve even for maritime. IMO will do that. So because these credits generated in voluntary markets go through a robust process of third-party audits. They are the high-quality credits and cannot be just wished away. They will be accounted for. Whether it is by regulatory bodies or by any other the global organizations. So that was my overall objective and message for today. And I thank you very much in the end for your participation. You can be in touch on the contact details which I shared. And this webinar recording will also be available on the company's social media pages like LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So you can always refer it. So thank you very much again. Bye-bye.